Greetings, class. My name is Brother Damien, and I'm a monk here at St. Martin's Abbey, and I'm your tech assistant too. Father Killian and I thought it would be a good idea to introduce myself, since I can't do so in person, and to introduce the next section of our class. As you know from the email I sent out, there are going to be a few changes in our schedule from what is printed in your syllabus. Father Killian thought that it would be better to save Flannery O'Connor and all of her wit and sass for the end of the semester. That'll be quite a fun end to the semester, I think. Instead of ending with St. Benedict, we're going to go into St. Benedict right now and his monastic rule. If you don't have a copy of it yet, you can get a copy of the text. I sent links in the last email that I sent. You can get it for like $2 for your Kindle or Nook. And if you don't have a Kindle or Nook, I believe, at least with Kindle, I know that you can still read the text through your web browser if you go to the Amazon website and click around under your account and Kindle and such. So you can get it real cheap, and you don't have to worry about having it delivered through the postal service to you. I've been a monk here for, I want to say like 4 years. I entered the monastery here in January of 2017 after working here at St. Martin's University in 2016 as the web content manager in the marketing and communications office. So I know a little bit about websites and internet communications. Actually, before I came here, I worked for a number of software companies coding and selling ebooks, not for companies large like Amazon, but littler startups, which I recommend getting into. If you get into the tech industry, start small. The little companies can take you a lot farther. That's the way to go. So how does a person go from a life in the tech industry to becoming a monk? I'm a real person, even though I am a monk and I wear all this black all the time. My favorite TV show is Futurama.
You're only 4 years old?
Precocious little scamp, ain't I?
I always cheer for the Sounders.
That is the sound of success. Of the Seattle Sounders' success.
A monk is a person who seeks God and seeks God alone, and that's something I think you'll find in the Rule of St. Benedict. To become a monk, one has to be looking for God and not looking for anything else. Not looking for social status or money, obviously. Not desperate for love or attention, but somebody who almost is looking for answers from the universe, but is also content, or wants to find contentment, I suppose, in the universe. And when a person begins this journey, they begin with the enigma of the idea that God can be found within oneself. That is to say that as rotten and as selfish and as imperfect as even as I am, that I trust that in silence I can find God deeply within myself, and as well as within each other person around me. I think if you read the Rule of St. Benedict closely, you'll see that's also how St. Benedict feels, that we can find God and we can find Christ too within one another. It's tremendously important to do so. Like I said, as a monk, as a young monk here, I've only been here for like 4 years. I don't know, not even, that makes me a junior monk. And as you can see on your screen, I'm like a year and a couple of months away from making my solemn profession. A junior monk is someone who has already made a simple profession, that is to say that I'm already in vows. I've made my monastic vows, but I'm not committed here for life. I'm only committed here until my vows expire in 2021. But I'm a lot farther along than a novice monk would be, or than a postulant who just entered the abbey. These are the ranks of monks. And then once you make your solemn profession, I should say once I've made my solemn profession in 2021, I'll be at the same rank as any other monk in the abbey. So before we get into the actual rule of St. Benedict itself, I want to talk a little bit about what it means to be a monk and what the vows that we make look like. Contrary to, I guess, popular belief, we don't make vows of poverty and vows of celibacy. These are not strictly speaking the vows that we make, although they are included in a certain form within the actual vows. But the vows that we make, at least here at St. Martin's, are vows of obedience, stability, and conversion of life. Obedience, stability, and conversion of life. That means that obedience is a form of trust and assenting the will, the very personal will that we have over even the use of our own gifts and the use of our own time, and entrusting that to someone else. Stability is the vow that we make that makes us actual monks rather than friars, like you've probably heard of Franciscans or Dominicans, preachers, or those who serve the poor and live with the poor as poor. They do good work, but they're friars and we are monks, and stability is what grounds us to this land. Stability is the vow that I will not leave this land until the day I die, and then I'll be buried on it. I'm sure you're aware of our cemetery that's just down the road. For all of our deceased brothers, including Father Gerard, who just passed away, the cemetery is our retirement home, our retirement plan. And that's what stability looks like. It's the idea that I'm not going to just run off and do whatever the heck I want, or I'm not going to go and be a monk at some other abbey, or I'm not going to leave and teach at some other school. You can't be a monk and be wandering the world and out and about. A monk is a person who finds a place and seeks to really focus on that place, to be grounded, and to not be wandering all the time, but to know that you can find God here and now just as well as anywhere else, and the importance of being able to focus on that. Our other vows of obedience and conversion of life. Conversion of life contains those vows that are so often thought of as belonging to monks, like celibacy and poverty. But what it looks like for us is conversion of life is the idea that we are continuing anew every day to live as Christians, to live like Christ, which includes his celibacy. It includes his singleness. The very word monk comes from the Greek word monos, which means one, or single, or alone. And it comes from a desert tradition of men who would live in the desert, and they would pray the scriptures, and they would find God alone, like Moses on the mountaintop. And so the conversion of life contains all of this. It contains this idea of radical not necessarily poverty, but radical communal living, where I don't have any of my own possessions. My possessions, strictly speaking, belong to the whole community. And you'll see in the rule, too, a program for monks to share resources, and the cellarer being the monk who distributes resources as are needed. Of course, I have everything that I need to do my work, right? I have this video camera that I'm talking to. I have the laptop where I do my homework and I do my studies. I have a massive library of books behind me. I have pretty much everything I need to pursue my vocation, to pursue my calling. And it's about being happy with what you have, and not being caught up in the rampant consumerism that seems to drive the world. And the last vow of obedience is not unique to monks, because you see it in parish priests where they have obedience to their bishop, but we as monks make obedience to our abbot. And Benedict has a very strong idea in mind for who this abbot is, which we'll take a look at later. But I mean, not much later. I believe it's chapter 2. That will help to contextualize what obedience actually means. It isn't some blind obedience to every whim and will, but it's a process of converting your desires in a way so that you're not disappointed, in a way so that you learn contentment. A person who is not exemplary of obedience would be a person who throws a temper tantrum when they don't get their way, or a person who is tremendously upset at every turn of events. But a person who is cultivating a life of obedience to other people, to mutual obedience to their own brothers and sisters, this is a person who is willing to give up part of themselves to help other people out. I think that's fundamentally at the heart of obedience. I'm just going to read from you from this paraphrase I have of the Rule of St. Benedict, which I was introduced to actually last year. Initially I hated it. I thought it was a terrible translation. I guess as a translation it is pretty bad. But as a paraphrase, it started to grow on me. And so I'm going to start from the beginning of the Rule of St. Benedict and comment on it as I go through it. By now you've probably heard parts of this, if not the whole thing, but this is just at the very beginning in the prologue, which is probably one of the most quotable parts of the text. Listen, my child. I want you to place the ear of your heart on the solid ground of the Master's wisdom. What I received, I'm passing on to you. This advice is from a spiritual father who loves you and gives you the sort of counsel that will shape your whole life. Listening is hard work, but it's the essential work. It opens you up to the God that you've rejected when you have only listened to yourself. If you are ready to give up your addiction to yourself, this message is for you. To listen is to equip yourself with the best resources available to serve the real Master, Christ the Lord. So let's go. The scriptures are stirring us like fire in our bones. It's high time now for you to wake from sleep. And this is a quotation from Romans chapter 13. This is the same quotation that Pope St. John Paul II uses in one of his books. I think he, in his translation, it says, "Rise, let us be on our way. Let us open our eyes wide to the light that shines out from God, and open our ears to the voice from heaven that shouts out every day, oh, that today you would hearken to his voice." And again, you who have ears to hear, listen to what the Spirit says to the churches. You might recognize that is from Revelation. That is the beginning of the part of Revelation where he's writing his letters to the churches. What does the Spirit say? Come, children, listen to me. I will teach you to fear the Lord. Run while you have the light of life, lest the darkness overtake you. This is why we want to establish a school for the Lord's service. In drawing up its code of conduct, we hope to avoid anything harsh or burdensome. Even so, the good of everyone involved may compel us to establish some rules that seem strict. Know that it's not for the sake of the rules, but rather it is to help heal our brokenness and to safeguard our love. Don't be overwhelmed by fear and run away from the way that leads to salvation. It's bound to be hard at first, but as we move on in this way of life and in faith, we will run on the road of God's good words, our hearts overflowing with delight. We know what it means to live in the way of love, even if there are no words to describe it. This then is our resolve, to never turn away from the Lord's teaching, but to put every good word of His into practice, sticking with our brothers and sisters in community until we die. Such patience, we know, will lead us to share in Christ's sufferings, but we trust it will also make us worthy to share in His kingdom. Amen.